Good afternoon from Berlin. Good afternoon, Dunia.
Good afternoon to everyone.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Yeah.
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Nader.
President.
Thank you very much.
Deputy.
Let me admit to all the guests first so that we can start easily.
Assalamu alaikum, Gilani Sahab, Naseem Malik from Berlin.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, मेरा नाम इसरार हुसैन आ रहा होगा, मेरा कंप्यूटर में थोड़ा गड़बड़ हो गई है।
जी 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 आपका जी मैं आज
can someone translate to us what he said? Good afternoon to everybody.
Hasnan.
Yeah, how are you, brother Nadeem? Fine?
Yes, I'm fine. I just arrived about half an hour ago from Stockholm.
Ah, where are you now?
I am in Berlin. I am going to have a meeting with some of the parliamentarians tomorrow morning.
Ah, okay, okay. How was your trip?
With some of the SPD from the Social
How was your
Democrats.
How was your trip?
Yes, I've just arrived. You know, I will have a meeting tomorrow. Today I had a meeting just quickly. You know, so they had some election campaign on Sunday.
Okay.
On Sunday there is a general election.
Ah, okay. Chairman, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Good as always, huh? MashaAllah.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Yes.
Our good friend Judy, she won the election in Canada.
Who?
Judy Sergio.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the international conference on the day of International Peace Day. We are celebrating, the whole world is celebrating today the International Peace Day, and we are commemorating the peace efforts of peacekeepers, peacemakers, and those who are all involved into the peace developing efforts into the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a crucial time on the world that while the United Nations General Assembly 76th session is ongoing, and this high-level sideline meeting been called by the International Human Rights Commission while to commemorate the International Day of Peace on the humanitarian crisis which the Southeast Asia is facing currently due to the situation of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is in question for the whole international community, not for a few days, a few moments. It's a question from the last 4 decades. Afghan peoples are subject to violence, subject to torture, and subject to the terrorism. They are flees 40 years back when the Soviet invented the Afghanistan, and they flee to Iran, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and the other neighboring countries. More than 5 million people are displaced during the Soviet invasion, and afterwards when the Soviet Union left, there was a Taliban regime, and international community left the Afghan peoples by their own. 20 years back, in 2001, the international community under the leading of United States of America once again invented Afghanistan and its sovereignty. And again, the peoples of Afghanistan was a victim of imposed war and invasion in Afghanistan. Ladies and gentlemen and excellencies, this is in a high time. Once again, the international community left the people of Afghanistan on the mercy of a situation which we can call the betrayal with the aspiration of the people of Afghanistan. Obviously, the UN General Assembly, where the all leadership is gathered, they are talking on these aspects. I've been in the UN General Assembly session yesterday and today on the opening, and I heard the remarks of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, that he was appealing to the international community that we cannot leave the Afghan people alone. We need the inclusive government into the Afghanistan, the respect of human rights, respect of women's rights, respect of an all international agreement in which the Afghanistan is a signatory. And this is the international community that they should ensure the rights which conferred by the international convents and international obligation over the Afghanistan to be enforced. We have no problem that how the Afghan peoples want and what the Afghan peoples want for the mode of governance for themselves. But obviously, on the other hand, this is a civilized world. And in this civilized world, where the 60 countries, Islamic countries are members of the international civilized world, the one country cannot be apart from the all 61 or 62 countries can live with their own. Excellencies, on this high time, while we are celebrating the International Peace Day, Secretary General Antonio Guterres has given a very loud and clear message. The world is facing a very critical moment. There are so many changing into the world which can threaten the peace. The COVID-19 itself threatening the peace. So we are at the bridge of nowhere. I wish that to hand over to you and listen to you and to note it down to you, so that our all contribution will be a part of tomorrow my presentation into the UN General Assembly directly. While the presidents and prime ministers and all the foreign ministers will represent their countries, obviously International Human Rights Commission will also represent into the General Assembly plenary session on the 4th, and we will present that what today all the participants and distinguished guests said, and that will be a message to the international community over the situation of Afghanistan, a humanitarian crisis, while the time of a peace and celebration of a peace. Thank you very much. The floor I am giving to the Excellency, the Honorable former Prime Minister of Islamic Republic of Pakistan, former Speaker of Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and presently serving as the leader of the opposition of the Senate of Pakistan, His Excellency Sayyid Yousafzai Gilani. Sir, floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the leadership of International Human Rights Commission for holding this important conference on the current situation of Afghanistan. We all know that the Taliban's lightning conquest of Afghanistan caught many people by surprise, perhaps including the Taliban themselves. However, it is not the country's first episode of unexpectedly quick military victory and consequent rapid change in regime. Historical examples may provide relevant lessons to the victorious Taliban. They have begun to govern the country, including pitfalls to be avoided in their own and in the nation's interest. The Taliban have acknowledged that mistakes were made during their previous stint in the power, and Afghanistan has changed since the 1990s. Whether these observations will effectively translate into action remains to be seen. Recent moves, including violent crackdowns on women protesters, brutality against journalists, the non-inclusive nature of the caretaker government, as well as reports of targeted repressive killings, raise doubt. Still, the Taliban seem fully aware of the needs to reach workable accommodations with neighboring countries. They have accepted much surrender that was offered to them. Moreover, for the most part, they were able to avoid prolonged urban warfare in Kabul and other large cities, unlike what happened during the 1992-1994 Mujahideen civil war, when Kabul was largely destroyed and depopulated. A substantive dialogue on the lessons put forward here, as well as other possible ways to learn from Afghanistan's history, is therefore worth pursuing. Ladies and gentlemen, Afghan political unity remains fragile. Most Afghans overwhelmingly want peace, but also want to preserve the current constitutional system that includes democracy, personal freedoms, free media, and women's rights. Taliban have said little to reassure citizens that their views have changed from the extreme restrictions they brutally enforced in the 1990s. The ongoing insurgency compounds myriad other challenges that make Afghanistan one of the most fragile states in the world. COVID-19 has caused both humanitarian hardships on top of already severe poverty, food insecurity, and climate invulnerability. A successful political settlement of the conflict leading to an inclusive and sustainable peace is the surest path to addressing these deep-rooted challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the world is following the events in Afghanistan with a heavy heart and deep disquiet about what lies ahead. All of us have seen the images in real time: chaos, unrest, uncertainty, and fear. Much lies in the balance. The progress, the hope, the dreams of the generation of young Afghan women and girls, boys and men. At this grave hour, I urge all parties, especially the Taliban, to exercise utmost restraint to protect lives and to ensure that humanitarian needs can be met. Conflict has forced hundreds of thousands from their homes. The capital city has seen a huge influx of internally displaced persons from the provinces around the country where they felt insecure or fled during fighting. I remind all parties of their obligations to protect civilians, I call on all parties to provide humanitarians with unimpeded access to deliver timely and life-saving services and aid. And I also urge all countries to be willing to receive Afghan refugees and refrain from deportations. Now is the time to stand as one. Ladies and gentlemen, the international community must be united and utilize all available instruments to ensure the following. First, we must speak with one voice to uphold human rights in Afghanistan. I call upon the Taliban and all parties to respect and protect international humanitarian law and the rights and freedoms of all persons. It is essential that the hard-won rights of Afghan women and girls are protected as they're protected in many Muslim countries. Second, the international community must unite to make sure that Afghanistan is never again used as a platform for safe haven for terrorist organizations. I appeal to the international community as a whole to stand together, to work together, and to act together and use all tools at its disposal to suppress the global terrorist threat in Afghanistan and guarantee the basic human rights will be respected, regardless of who holds powers. These two fundamental principles in which our world has such a deep and abiding interest must be upheld. The humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan affects more than 18 million people, more than half of the country's population. It is vital that the basic services continue to be provided. Afghans are a proud people with a rich cultural heritage. They have known generations of war and hardships. They deserve our full support. The following days will be pivotal. The world is watching. We cannot and must not abandon the people of Afghanistan. Now, what we must do. I call for an immediate end to violence, for the safety, security, and the rights of all Afghans to be respected, and for adherence to Afghanistan's international obligations, including all international agreements to which it is a party. I urge the Taliban and all other parties to exercise utmost restraint to protect lives and to ensure that humanitarian needs can be met. I call on all donors, countries, and organizations to renew their support so that life savings response is urgently scaled up, delivered on time, and suffering is mitigated. No more than ever, Afghan children, women, and men need the support and solidarity of the international community. I urge to all states to dig deep for the people of Afghanistan in their darkest hour of need. I urge them to provide timely, flexible, and comprehensive funding. Almost half of the population of Afghanistan, 18 million people, need urgent humanitarian assistance to survive. 1 in 3 Afghans do not know where the next meal will come from. More than half of all children under 5 are expected to become acutely malnourished in the next year. People are losing access to basic goods and services every day. A humanitarian catastrophe looms as severe drought and coming harsh winter conditions meant extra food, shelter, and health supplies. We must be urgently fast-tracked to Afghanistan. Today, Afghanistan stands at an important crossroads. The Taliban's takeover of the country brings new challenges and opportunities for the war-ravaged country. If all the players play their cards right, and there is an inclusive government in Afghanistan, then Afghanistan can be accepted back to international fold. And more importantly, the country can see the much needed stability, not only Afghanistan, but also the entire region. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that peace in Afghanistan is a priority for Pakistan as our destinies are conjoined. A peaceful, stable region will bring greater connectivity, prosperity, development for the people of South and Central Asia. We must support the efforts for peace and stability in Afghanistan and the suffering of Afghan people. Pakistan has always played an important role and will continue to strive for their noble cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, Prime Minister, for your valuable remarks over the situation of Afghanistan and emphasizing on the international community that how they should deal this catastrophe of the humanitarian crisis which the people of Afghanistan is facing. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, I have to slightly change the speaker order because two or three of our honorable guests are already occupied into the different sideline events of the General Assembly as well. I welcome the Excellency Dr. Hazrat Umar Zakhewal, the former Minister of Finance, Afghanistan 2009 to 2015. He served as the former Afghan President's Special Representative, and he was an Afghan ambassador to Pakistan from 2016 to 2018. Before coming to this sideline event, Ambassador Zakhewal was in a meeting with the President Hamid Karzai, Abdullah, and the Pakistan Special Envoy on Afghanistan, Ambassador Muhammad Sadiq, and the other Afghan leaders. I urged to him on that time, when in the daytime we were chatting with each other, that if the possibility President Karzai to attend the sideline event, but obviously the situation is over there, demanding some more urgent and some more attention of issues which are going on the ground of Afghanistan. Now I'm giving the floor to His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Hazrat Umar Zakhewal for addressing the audience and the distinguished guest. Excellency, floor is yours. Excellency, unmute yourself. Excellency Ambassador, yes.
Okay, a very good morning, a very good evening to you all. Thank you, Ambassador Dr. Amin Khan, and let me thank also International Human Rights Commission for inviting me and also for hosting this forum. I do not have a prepared statement like the excellent statement that we just was just delivered by a good friend, former Prime Minister Gilani. Let me associate myself with almost all his statement entirely. Very nicely spoken, and thank you for that position, Mr. Prime Minister. Let me start with this. The collapse of a state is not a small thing. It's a huge thing. It happens once in a while in other countries. And in this country, this is the 4th or 5th time in the past 40 years. And at this time, it happened so suddenly, it happened so rapidly, it happened so unexpectedly. And before it happened, Afghans already were quite stressed with a very tense economic situation. There was already a humanitarian crisis. You can imagine if in a country where anywhere between 100 to 200 people get killed a day, not just 1 or 2 days, every single day for the past 1 or 2 or 3 years. You can imagine the toll it takes on humans, the toll it takes on the psyche of the people, the toll it takes on the economics of the country. And then on the top of that, at the end, add the collapse of the state. So it was huge. It was a shock. It still is a shock. It is unbelievable. And we have to cope with it. No doubt, this collapse did bring the war to an end, at least for now, and we hope that it continues to stay that way. But it has also brought fears, concerns, because the Taliban once before were rulers here in Kabul for 6 years. And again, back then, they put a very devastating war to an end, but then there was a cost to it, a human cost to it, rights cost to it, opportunities cost to it, particularly for women, particularly people with some liberal, not very liberal, but just some moderate mindsets and all that. This time around, like the Prime Minister alluded to it, we do hear, and we do also see some flexibilities, that lessons will be learned from the past, both of their own and of those others. To what extent they're learned, there seems to be limited so far. We do remain engaging with the Taliban leaders, myself included here, to remind them of the past and to remind them what is at stake in the future. There is an opportunity right now. We can lay a foundation for a very peaceful and stable Afghanistan, or if we do not get it right, then there will be another chaos, another cycle of violence. For how many more years, we don't know. And we must not go down that path again. And that is what we are engaging here with. And for that foundation to be indeed solid, then it's not just a government that we need to have that is representative of the faces of this country, different ethnic faces, different regional faces, but of gender balancedness as well. A state that guarantees and ensures rights and opportunities for the young, for women, and for others. A state that has national as well as international acceptability, because we're a poor country, we're an aid-dependent country. Without aid, we do not know, at least in the short to medium term, how our economy will function. So for that, we need international acceptability, because without international acceptability, we're not going to receive assistance, at least at the magnitude that we need, and at the magnitude they need to be delivered. So these are the type of discussion that I just want to share that we do get engaged with. Just one last thing on the international community. Whatever the situation, however you describe it, if you call it a crisis, if you call it a catastrophe, if you call it something else, it is of the international community's making as well. So the international community does have a responsibility towards the Afghans. Sorry, I had time myself. So the international community has a responsibility as well. And they must deliver. They certainly withdrew their forces. They led to what happened last. Their actions and their management of the situation led to what happened last month, but they do have responsibility towards these people. And they must deliver on that responsibility. But it's not just a responsibility issue. Any fallout in this country is going to have consequences for regional countries and has consequences for international countries as well. Refugees is one, but there's more to that, and I'm not going to go into that, but you can imagine what those would be. And therefore, Afghanistan, if you say that the international community completed their presence or concluded their presence, and that's it with Afghanistan, no, this is not it. We are here. If we are peaceful, if we are stable, we will be less of a headache to the international community. But if you are not, we are going to be a headache. Let's be certain about that. But that I'm going to stop. Thanks again, and I'm looking forward to other deliberations.
Thank you very much, Excellency, brother and Ambassador Umar Zakhawal. You've been very realistic on a Afghan situation. I know that you are sitting in Kabul and on ground, and I think that all of the international community is watching this event at this moment. Already this event has gone onto the UN web as well, so that the all diplomatic missions in New York, those who are involved in the preparation of today, the session has been started over there in the General Assembly, and hopefully they will also look at the words, whatever this sideline event has, and the honorable guest has elaborating the situation and their own views. I welcome the Excellency, Madam President Amina Gharib Fakim. She just joined, and although according to the speaker order, she was after the Excellency Prime Minister Sayyid Yusuf Raza Gilani. Now, after the Ambassador Zakhawal's remarks, I'm requesting to Her Excellency Dr. Amina Fardos Gharib Fakim, first female and the sixth President of the Republic of Mauritius, to pass her statement. Madam President, floor is yours.
Thank you, Excellency. Greetings to all the speakers and greetings to the people in Afghanistan. Today is a special day. Today is the 21st of September, and we celebrate peace. And so we wish, of course, that peace prevails in this beautiful country of Afghanistan. As you have rightly said, I've just caught the tail end of the previous speaker. You know, there has been responsibility from outside, and Afghanistan has been a country under occupation for over 30 years. And immediately after the United States pulled out, everywhere the press was saying that Afghanistan has been the graveyard of empires. And this has resonated, you know, across the world. But I think beyond this issue of war, beyond the issue of occupation, I think Afghanistan deserves peace. But is peace translated only by absence of war? I don't think so. I think peace, it can be translated in other forms, and I can just quickly elaborate on this, because I think all the ingredients have to be put in place for this country to benefit from this very elusive ingredient which has escaped the country for so long, and that is peace. Because it's only when there is peace that there will be stability, there will be progress, and there will, of course, be, you know, everything that this country deserves. But what are the ingredients that will enable this peace to be long-lasting? And I think already we can look at so many key features, and we can look at, well, right now, I'll just take the macro indicator, which we are discussing right now in New York, and that is climate change. Now, if you look at the terrain of Afghanistan, it's a very dry country, unless I'm mistaken, but there are pockets where, of course, agriculture is thriving. So how do we bring peace within the framework of climate change? I mean, this is something that has to be on the table, because what we're witnessing in Africa is migration because of climate change, because of areas which have gone arid. And as we speak, there is a terrible famine in south of Madagascar, and it's the first one that has been ascribed to climate change. So climate change is going to be the overarching feature, the overarching condition under which, of course, we will get peace, because we will stop people migrating, we'll ensure food security, because climate change will impact food security. But how do we bring this to bear in a country that needs to catch up on education, that needs to catch up on health services, that need to catch up on social safety net, if there is any at all? How do we ensure that climate change is addressed through, for example, poverty? And the indicators which coming out of the World Bank shows that a fair percentage of the Afghan people, they're still living what they describe as poverty. But again, it remains debatable whether the $2 can be used as the yardstick for poverty. But anyway, these are the conditionalities which are there. Now, if you then tease out individually, education, for example, education has to be made available for all, for girls and boys, so that institution can be built. An institution can be built when there is empowerment, there is education, there is access to technology, there is money, of course, consolidation of existing institutions. So education will be key for the longer lasting peace in Afghanistan. Empowerment of women and men together will also contribute. Then when we have this basic ingredient, we'll of course lean on the surrounding region as well, cooperation, because the Americas, they have left. We have to look at how cooperation and collaboration with neighbors can help solve the problem of the country. And this is again something which is increasingly being discussed in the global arena, that instead of looking for allies elsewhere, we need to fall back on our neighbors. And I think we have one example. We have one example in the Far East. We have one example. I'm not going to superpose Vietnam to what has happened recently in Afghanistan, but the scenario is not very far from different. And Vietnam emerged because they had the support of the surrounding region, and they progressed. So I think what we are looking for is multilateralism, yes, but also regional cooperation and regional collaboration, and so that peace and security can be maintained, so that peace becomes less than elusive, becomes a reality. And this, of course, will be the foundation for what will happen in Afghanistan much later. And one thing that Afghanistan has, of course, it has many plus points. It has sat at the nexus of the very famous Belt and Road Initiative, which has been there for so long. It was right there. So you have a huge culture which can be exported, which can be valorized, and which can be used to empower the local population. So there are so many plus points that Afghanistan has and needs to be showcased, so that Afghanistan can be sold, if I may use the word, as a destination for tourism. We can be sold as a destination for investment. Afghanistan has so many resources that needs to be, I'm not going to say exploited, but it must be used to the advantage of the people of Afghanistan. But the challenges remain. The challenge of insecurity remain. The challenges of poverty will be there until and unless the international community also pays attention to that region, which has been devastated for far too long. And so I think also the geographical positioning in terms of the geopolitics Afghanistan has a very important role to play. So I think if you bring all these together, I don't see why, if we bring all these ingredients together, I don't see why Afghanistan should not emerge as a strong country, should not emerge as a key player, because you have been in the past. History has it on record that Afghanistan has been a key player, and Afghanistan still has a very important role to play, but provided all the institutions we start building, we ensure long-lasting peace, we ensure peace and stability, we ensure education, we ensure empowerment, we ensure that all the various stakeholders play the role. But again, it will depend, of course, on the moving parts. And we know what the moving parts are. And these moving parts, very often, they are not benign. And so Afghanistan will have to start very fast building its institution so that it can tackle these fast moving parts. So that's my 5 cents, and I'll remain at disposal for any addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much for your valuable statement. I think the people are hearing the voice of an international community. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's a time to move and give a floor to the person. Her career is full of diplomacy. She is in England at this moment, and on my personal request and insistence, she joined, because the Southeast Asia cannot be apart from the situation of Afghanistan. So I'm giving the floor to Her Excellency, Mrs. Dunya Mamnoon Hussain, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Maldives. Excellency, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and greetings from Maldives, though I am at present in the United Kingdom, as the Ambassador has mentioned. It's a pleasure to be here to talk on a very important issue, particularly in relation to Afghanistan, which is a member of SAARC, and we in the Maldives are extremely concerned with the situation. We have all been watching, and in fact, the whole world has been watching in horror, the scenes of turmoil and desperation unfolding in Afghanistan in the last few weeks, in the recent few weeks. By the time that the hot Afghanistan sun has peeked over the horizon each morning, families have already contemplated or are contemplating tough questions. How will we access food today? Will there be water to drink? Where will we sleep tonight? And what does tomorrow hold? Today, as we celebrate the International Day of Peace, Afghanistan faces a humanitarian crisis of huge magnitude. Afghans face an extremely dire situation and are confronted with protracted conflict, severe drought, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. And the drought is compounding the humanitarian crisis, and the upcoming winter conditions are unfortunately expected to be very harsh. Humanitarian partners are therefore calling for urgent supplies to the country. It is therefore crucial for the international community to take swift action to ensure that the people of Afghanistan have unimpeded access to life-saving assistance, and that humanitarian funding to support them is rapidly scaled up. 1 in 3 Afghans is experiencing crisis or emergency level of food insecurity, and more than half of the children under the age of 5 are at the brink of acute malnutrition. The severe drought is compounding this crisis, and the winter conditions, since they are expected to be harsh, we can see that the conditions are going to further deteriorate. And there are huge numbers of displaced people and refugees outside the country or pouring from Afghanistan to other countries around. Scenes of protest across the country, however, show that though the Taliban have won power, they have not achieved the confidence of the Afghan people, and the world community is witness to the humanitarian catastrophe in the country. Maldives empathizes particularly with the plight of Afghan people, and especially women and girls. My thoughts are with Afghan women, many of whom are seeing rights that they took for granted being stripped away right in front of their eyes. The truth of what life has been and will be like for women in Afghanistan is not so simple, I agree. Women's rights, though, had made enormous gains in the last couple of decades, though these changes were largely experienced in the country's cities, where a minority of the population lives. However, today we are seeing these gains being reversed and women banned from work, girls from school, and the imposition of strict codes of dress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the lives of millions of Afghan civilians are at stake. So any sanctions or counterterrorism measures applied by member states must always exclude and exempt impartial humanitarian activities from their scope. We all stand with the people of Afghanistan. We are determined to stick by them as they enter this next deeply uncertain phase. The role of women and girls is crucial, as anywhere. They must have access to education. They must have rights and access to all essential services as anywhere else in the world. A better future for Afghanistan in particular depends on the meaningful participation of all ethnic groups and minorities, and of course women, in all sectors of Afghanistan's economy and governance. I want to emphasize 3 key areas that must be addressed if we are to effectively meet these needs at scale. First, the international community must keep its pressure on the Taliban to respect all international agreements and signed conventions by the state of Afghanistan. They must allow girls to go to school and educational institutions and ensure that women are allowed to work as before. Second, ensure funding is available to support sector-wide interventions that are responsive to gender, age, and disability. Such funding must include targeted interventions that address the specific needs of women and girls. Finally, standing in solidarity with all Afghan citizens, it is our collective objective today, requires securing the right, enabling environment to ensure safe, rapid, and unimpeded access for humanitarian workers and relief items. Afghanistan is a tough test for the international community today, but it is the job and purpose of us all at this conference and those near and far to rise to the challenge of supporting a country facing several simultaneous crises. And I urge that now is not the time for empty words and rhetoric. To stand in true solidarity with Afghans, they need our concrete action. Now more than ever, all countries must come forward to act on a humanitarian basis and should engage the Taliban regime and all stakeholders to respect human rights, and especially the case of women and girls. We must not fail Afghanistan. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your valuable statement. It is a high time for the people of Afghanistan. They have to listen to the international community that the international community are not going to leave the people of Afghanistan alone on the humanitarian basis, because as you mentioned, and the President Amina has also mentioned that the Afghanistan is facing the drought situation. The second, the situation often food shortage and economic instability in Afghanistan, which might lead the more dangerous situation if the international community and the neighboring countries are not going to intervene for the humanitarian purpose. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, although the country is not invented, although the country is not facing the foreign invention, but yes, of course, the similar situation has been facing by the many countries, and the one is Lebanon too. I'm giving a floor to the ambassador of the International Human Rights Commission and a philanthropist, the people knows his name, Dr. Nader Shah, to show a solidarity in his statement on the International Day of Peace to the peoples of Afghanistan. Dr. Nader Shah, the floor is yours. Unmute yourself. It is my humble request, whenever the floor has been given to any distinguished guest, they should unmute because I had muted all.
Yeah. Thank you, dear President. My pleasure, always. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. Today, I feel honored to present my human point of view as the Ambassador of International Human Rights Commission to Lebanon on the celebration of International Peace Day, as well as to address the situation Southeast Asia, Middle East facing in this conference as the sideline high-level event of 76th United Nations General Assembly session. In 2021, as we heal from the COVID-19 pandemic, we are inspired to think creatively and collectively about how to help everyone recover better, how to build resilience, and how to transform our world into one that is more equal, more just, equitable, inclusive, sustainable, and healthier. The pandemic has been accompanied by a surge in stigma, discrimination, which only cost more lives instead of saving them. The virus, as we know, attacks all without caring about where are we from or what we believe in. Confronting this common enemy of a humankind, we must be reminded that we are not each other's enemy. To be able to recover from the devastation of the pandemic, we must make peace with one another, and we must make peace with nature. Despite the travel restriction and economic shutdowns, climate change is not on pause. What we need is a green and sustainable global economy and that produces jobs, reduces emissions, and build resilience to climate impact. In 2021, theme for the International Day of Peace is recovering better for an equitable and sustainable world. We invite you to join the effort of the International Human Rights Commission and United Nations as we both organizations focusing on recovering better for a more equitable and peaceful world. Celebrate peace by standing up against acts of hate online and offline, and by spreading compassion, kindness, and hope in the face of the pandemic and as we recover. In the present time, my country, Lebanon, is also facing two types of crises, economically and politically. And on other ways, pandemic hits the normal life of people so badly. And this time of these crises, Lebanon also need attention of international community to assist us in this difficult period. Let me remind you that peace is connected with economy and political stability of every nation. We must help all those vulnerable nations for us suffering from the pandemic. Economic and political crisis, if we need peaceful world for us and coming generation. Now, I would like to show my sympathy with the people of Afghanistan as you're talking about. The people of Afghanistan who have been betrayed by the so-called international community after 20 years, just recently with unplanned withdrawal from Afghanistan. They have been suffering before and will suffer more and more in the coming years due to the blindfolded decision of leaders who are responsible to kill the aspiration of young people of Afghanistan. How can we achieve the lasting peace if the girls and women were deprived from education and for their basic rights? How can we call ourselves the agent of peace if 35 million people of Afghanistan suffer and face the humanitarian crisis due to our misfortunate and adventurous? Excellencies, I may submit few words on behalf of the International Human Rights Commission that first, we must push the international community to decide whether they stand for humanity or for political or business-based lies. Second, we must act to save the humankind from climate disaster to conflict. It's our collective responsibility. Third, the international community should ask the so-called world leader to come out from their political twisting and to act to save the people in conflict, or otherwise be ready to face the consequences of time. I may thank you for your patience for hearing me. Thank you so much. Thank you, dear President.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much for your vulnerable remarks and your suggestion for the international community. The voice is heard by the international community, and it's going to listen by all the fellows, those who are a part of the UN General Assembly at this moment. Ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, dear President.
Excellencies. Now I'm moving forward to give a floor as slightly the things are changed because of the timings. I'm giving the floor to the Honorable, Right Honorable Miss Jennifer Rajkumar, member of the State Assembly of the New York State. She's sitting in New York and representing the United States of America at this moment with us. Recently, she been visited Pakistan, and unfortunately, I was not having a time to meet her. But Excellency Prime Minister Sayyid Raza Gilani, he met her, and she's a very vocal voice for human rights. She's basically human rights lawyer and community activist. The floor is yours, Honorable Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can you hear me?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Excellent. Assalamu alaikum and greetings to all the world leaders, diplomats, and policy makers. I'm honored to be at this conference with all of you. This intelligent group of former heads of state, parliamentarians, and high-level policy advisors gives me great hope. We come together from all across the globe to help chart a way forward for creating peace in Afghanistan. I address you from New York City, where I serve as an elected assemblywoman in the legislature of New York State. As the United Nations General Assembly convenes today here in New York City, and as my nation's President, Joe Biden, prepares to address the UN General Assembly, I would like to address the humanitarian crisis unfolding in Afghanistan. It has been 20 years of war in Afghanistan, and we now have the opportunity to move beyond war. But first, we have to manage this crisis the right way. The world must not cut off aid to Afghanistan right now. The more we isolate Afghanistan, the more the region will spiral downwards. There will be complete economic collapse. The refugee crisis will explode. And without the world's help, Afghanistan may become a hotbed of extremism, breeding terrorism. The world must not abandon the people of Afghanistan, because although leadership may have failed, the people themselves do not fail. I believe in the people. If we uplift the Afghan people, they will uplift the nation. Indeed, through all the pain of the past month, following evacuation, there is hope. A US Marine who died in the explosion at the Kabul airport was seen just the day before the explosion that killed him, smiling and giving candy to Afghan children. And don't forget scenes of the US airlift that have gone all around the world. The US military put more people in the cargo holds of their C-17 planes than ever before, just to get as many Afghan refugees out of the country as possible, as quickly as possible. In photos that have gone viral around the world, you can see the Afghan refugees in the cargo hold of the American C-17 plane, and many of them will resettle here in America to begin a new life. Through international cooperation, we can create a way forward in the most dire of humanitarian circumstances. Consider this: many young Afghans were born after 9/11 and are not accustomed to living under Taliban rule. They are used to education, to freedom, to opportunity. With no memory of 9/11, many young Afghans do not even know why the United States was in Afghanistan in the first place. So we need to ask, what narrative will we be teaching and transmitting to the youth of Afghanistan? Let it be a narrative of international cooperation that we transmit to the Afghan youth, an image of a world where all the nations of the world are rooting for them, for their freedom, for their safety, for their opportunity. They should understand the history that led us here, yes, but we should also enlist the Afghan youth in a positive vision for a peaceful future. A month ago in Geneva, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, spoke during a special emergency session for the Human Rights Council. From the proceedings, there are two takeaways that I would like to highlight. First, the Council determined that peace in Afghanistan can only be achieved by a process that is Afghan-led and Afghan-owned. The people of Afghanistan must own and lead the fight for peace. The rest of the world should empower them in this endeavor, but the endeavor must be theirs to lead. Second, the rest of the world must carefully monitor the treatment of women and girls in Afghanistan and use that as a barometer. As Michelle Bachelet eloquently stated, a fundamental red line will be the Taliban's treatment of women and girls, and respect for their rights to liberty, freedom of movement, education, self-expression, and employment, guided by international human rights and norms. In particular, ensuring access to quality secondary education for girls will be an essential indicator of commitment to human rights. Mahbouba Siraj, a human rights activist and CEO of Afghan Women's Network, recently asked about the new Taliban's intentions towards women. What are they going to do? She asks. Kill all of us? The answer to her rhetorical question is frightening to think about, but we must think about it and recall the bravery of so many women and girls in the face of the Taliban over the past 20 years. They include global heroine Malala Yousafzai, who was shot in the head by the Taliban in Pakistan for daring to go to school as a girl. Malala famously declared, "All I want is an education, and I am afraid of no one." These brave women and girls should be supported. When she was Secretary of State of the United States, Hillary Clinton used to visit women and girls all around the world in their villages. To her, this was just as important as meeting heads of state, and for good reason. When women are thriving, economies boom. There is a direct correlation between women's equality and peace and security. This ideal is reflected in the UN Convention to End All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I was always struck by these words of the UN Women's Rights Treaty. The full and complete development of a country, the welfare of the world, and the cause of peace require the maximum participation of women on equal terms with men in all fields. The Reverend Dr. Susan Brooks here in Chicago also encapsulates this idea. She says when we challenge the attitudes and norms that enable violence against women, we also are helping to confront the conditions that support war. Closely monitoring and supporting the rights of women and girls will help the cause of a peace in Afghanistan. I will leave you with this story of one of the most famous poets in Afghanistan history, a woman named Rabia Balki. She was brave and dared to love someone of another class, breaking class structure, and having the bravery to love was taboo for women at the time. She was imprisoned and wrote her final poem with the blood from her own wrists, saying trying to escape is not possible. Let us support the bravery of women and girls in Afghanistan, as well as all minority groups, journalists, artists, taking them out of that prison. Their bravery can grow a GDP, boost an economy, advance peace and security in the world. To the people of Afghanistan who see this, I want you to know we are here for you. Leadership may fail, but people do not fail. And we will not fail you this time. We must not. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Jennifer Rajkumar, for your bold and very decisive statement. Obviously, the International Human Rights Commission and international community is emphasizing from the day one on Afghan Taliban. And although that we are not wanting to dictate anyone, we want to ensure the vulnerability of women and girls in Afghanistan should not be seen by the international community as a disaster for Afghanistan or the region. We do stand with the women, we do stand with the girls, and we are emphasizing and negotiating. Although the 2 days before I was in Doha, I met several functionaries of a government of Qatar, and as well as I've been engaging with the Palawan office over there. We pass our demand that they should work on it for the viable and inclusive Afghanistan, ensure the education should be remain a prime for the girls and women. Their jobs and their workplaces should be secured as like as other Muslim countries. We had made we have made our point to them, and we are watching them about their action, because as someone said that action speaks louder than the words. We are looking towards the action rather than the word. And as you mentioned, the Malala Yousafzai, when she was shot by the Taliban, on that time, His Excellency Yousafzai was the Prime Minister, the General Pervez Musharraf was the President of Pakistan, and when Prime Minister Gilani came into the power, and he reiterated on UN General Assembly, he reiterated the two women from Pakistan. The one, the Nightingale of a Peace, Muhtarma Shahid Benazir Bhutto, the former first ever Muslim head of government into the Muslim world. And the second, the Malala Yousafzai, for her stand for an education for the girls and women, an education of all children across the world. Thank you very much, Assemblywomen. Now I'm moving towards former member of the Swedish Parliament, a reserve member of the Swedish Parliament. He is the he is not only the politician and member of a parliament. He is ambassador at large of the International Human Rights Commission and a vice chairman for the European region. His Excellency Ambassador Naseem Ahmed Khan, Malik Naseem Ahmed Khan, floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador.
Before you start, Excellency, I would like to ask everyone to keep this statement meaningful and short so that we should hear a lot of people as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairman, and the Excellencies, and especially Excellency Yousafzai Gilani from Pakistan, the former Prime Minister, whom I have met several times. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. As a Swedish Muslim and a politician, I want to bring some very special as a Swedish national also, that a little history, what Sweden has been working and what is needed now. We celebrate from 1981, the United Nations General Assembly announced to have the Peace Day. Each year, the International Day of Peace is observed around the world on 21st September. The UN General Assembly has declared this as a day to strengthening the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. Some of the excellencies have said this, and we are observing, we are repeating these words, from the last many years. Some people have just informed us, and we know about Vietnam, the First World War, Second World War, the Middle East crisis, and now the Afghan crisis. In 2021, as we heal from the COVID-19 pandemic, we are inspired to think creatively and collectively about how to help everyone recover better, how to build resilience, and how to transform our world into one that is more equal, more just, inclusive, and healthier. In February 2021, the Security Council unanimously passed a resolution calling for member states to support a sustained humanitarian pause. Here I have to say, because most of the members today we are here, we are from this area, to local conflicts. The global ceasefire must continue to be honored to ensure people caught in conflict have access of life-saving vaccination and treatments. And this is what is needed in areas where we are living. The pandemic has been accompanied by a surge in stigma, discrimination, and hatred, which only cost more lives instead of saving them. The viral attacks without caring about where we are from what we believe in, confronting this common enemy of humankind, we must be reminded that we are not each other's enemy. We are human beings. We are not each other's enemy. To be able to recover from the devastation of the pandemic, we must make a peace with one another. Ladies and gentlemen, since 2001, Afghanistan has made advances. This I am saying because my country, Sweden, has contributed a lot in this, according to the UNESCO latest report. Yet these critical gains for the country's development are at risk now. The right to education for all our learners, especially girls, must be upheld in the face of looming humanitarian crisis. And this is all we are sitting here. We have to stress in our countries for this. The report found that the total number of enrolled students increased from 1 million to 10 million since 2001. And now it is all at risk. As Sayyid Yousafzai Gilani mentioned this also. The report entitled the right of education, what is at stake in Afghanistan, details the progress made at all levels of the system, and sets out the wide range of constitutional and legal commitments the country made to advance to the right of education. This is, we have to tell the Taliban from our countries that the commitments they have made, and they have to respect that, because Afghanistan has ratified international normative instruments of education and women's rights, and enshrined the right to education for all citizens in the Constitution, guarantee 9 years of compulsory education for all boys and girls. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to, in the end, I want to say something that we have seen from Vietnam till now, the bombings, only the bombings. We can see when the New World Order announced after the fall of USSR, of war and terror with weapons, could not bring peace. Instead, a USA withdrew from Afghanistan in the hands of Taliban. It is time to take pause. The New World Order must be, as a Muslim, we call it a holy jihad. It is with the pen. Now the pen is needed to be supported by every nation. Let this new jihad with the pen start from Afghanistan. And if we give education to the Afghan children, definitely, I assure you that we can have peace in our, not only in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iran, in Uzbekistan, everywhere. So now the main source is the pen. Now we have to fight with the word, with the pen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you very much. Before I move to the security and peace experts, I'm giving a floor to the Excellency, Right Honorable Mrs. Vinny Kazia, the Member of a Parliament and a first female leader of an opposition Parliament of Uganda. Her Excellency Vinny Kazia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me pleasure to be part of this global discussion. Today, as we commemorate the International Day of Peace, my heart reaches out to the people of Afghanistan. I join Your Excellencies to condemn the brutality that is happening in Afghanistan. And I pray that whoever is talking about education, let us talk about inclusive education. Women's equality and empowerment is a precondition for peace. And peace that is not gender sensitive, peace that is gender blind, peace that is not taking a holistic approach of reaching out to both the girls and boys, men and women, may not take us anywhere. I therefore want to call upon the leadership in Afghanistan. Give education chance. And as you give education chance, give it to both the boys and girls. It hurts to see that the girls are not given a fair trial in terms of education. I was so impressed by the statement that the UN representative made when she said that you uplift the Afghanistan people, they will uplift Afghanistan. It is a very, very important statement that when you empower women, you empower the world. We cannot talk about peace when we are not talking about equality for all. We cannot talk about development and equal opportunities when there are some other communities and other sections of the society that will be marginalized. And as we talk about peace, let's not forget that peace is not only the absence of war, the absence of guns, and the absence possible of even human beatings and torture. Peace, lack of peace can be as a result of the environmental conditions that people are living in. Lack of peace can be the sense of insecurity that people feel. And therefore, as we look at the situation in Afghanistan, I call upon you, the world leaders, let it be a situation for all of us. Let's not trivialize the seriousness of this matter. It's a matter that touches the hearts of all of us, the leaders of the world. And therefore, as we think about it, let us think about a holistic approach. Let us think about a situation that we look at women, girls, boys, and the elderly, so that when peace comes, we all enjoy it. When peace comes, we all benefit from it. I do pray and sincerely pray that Afghanistan comes back to normal, that the people of Afghanistan can see peace once again and continue to develop their country. I wish all of you successful deliberations, and I pray that we all work together towards making Afghanistan a better place for everybody to live in, irrespective of their ethnicity, irrespective of their religious affiliation. We are all humans. Before the Creator, we are all one. And therefore, this conversation is very critical, is very important. We all need to respect the outcome of this conversation. I want to thank you, Your Excellency, and I thank you, Your Excellencies, for getting together and discuss the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. I am Winnie Kiza, a member of parliament in Uganda, the first female leader of opposition, like His Excellency mentioned, but I'm passionate about human rights. I wouldn't want to have rights respected for specific categories of people, leaving others behind. I just want us to go as humanity, no one left behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Winnie Kezia. It is a very beautiful words that no one should left behind. Let me remind all excellencies participating here, on the 10th day of December, while the international community will celebrate the World Human Rights Day, International Human Rights Commission is going to hold the World Conference on Human Rights 2021 in Pakistan in person. I myself and the Prime Minister Yousafzai Gilani will be the host, and you all are invited. The official invitation will be extended to all of you to participate in person and come to Pakistan. And we will start by saying goodbye on that time to each other when we are leaving after that conference in person with the message of a hope, solidarity, compassion, and peace, respect of human rights and women's rights, gender equality for the whole world, from Pakistan to across the world and across the countries, and to start off a very bright 2022. So this is an information which I have to my responsibility to provide you as well. Now I'm moving towards His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Hassan Boussaid, IHRC Special Envoy to the United Nations Geneva, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Middle East and Africa, from Lebanon Secretariat. Excellency, floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to welcome most of my colleagues. First of all, I would like to start by the credible reports that we have received of serious abuses by the Taliban in Afghanistan, including extrajudicial executions of civilians, restrictions on women, and protests against the movement rule. We also view with concern the executions and urge the establishment of a mechanism to closely monitor the actions of the Taliban in terms of their compliance with international laws and Sharia that preserve the required rights. We hope that the Syrian authorities in Afghanistan will treat women and girls well, and that these rights should be a basic red line that the diverse religious and ethnic minorities in Afghanistan also face the threat of violence and persecution, and that reports of killing and targeted attacks in the few months past. We also see the need to hold the disobedient groups within the Taliban accountable for their actions, as millions fear for their lives and the situation is vague and painful. It is also noted that many residents are hiding for fear of reprisals from the Taliban, continuing to search homes, and there have been reports of property confiscation and reprisals. There are international bodies calling for the 31st sessions, special sessions that was held by the United Nations Human Rights Council, and in which we actively participated in the need to hold the US military and other armies participating in the coalition, including the British and Australian, accountable for the alleged human rights violations they committed in Afghanistan, noting the targeting of civilians, journalists, activists, and groups of minorities. The Council decision considered that it would consider a draft resolution submitted by Pakistan expressing concern about reports of violations. Accordingly, ladies and gentlemen, we believe it is necessary to stand with the decisions of the United Nations International Human Rights Council, in which it called for a statement in a session scheduled for March 2022 and urge all parties to respect human rights law, which includes the full and effective participation of women and minorities. Accordingly, we ask this session to assign with us and our diplomatic status in international relations, our ambassador to Afghanistan, to assist the international community for human rights in preparing the studies that we implicitly mentioned, so that the session that we will follow in the Council are credible and have strong results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you very much for your short brief. I'm not going to use the time. Let me bring the voice from Afghanistan, a woman of Afghanistan first, and then I will move to the international relations and security expert. Now it is a time that I'm giving the floor to Her Excellency, Miss Hosna Jalil. She was the former Deputy Minister of Interior in the history of Afghanistan, and then before the Taliban took over the power, she was serving as the Deputy Minister for Women Affairs of Afghanistan. She is a vocal voice for the women's rights. She is an exemplary woman out of millions of women in Afghanistan. Hosna Jalil is a name. She's still working to enforce the women's rights in the difficult situation as well. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, for having me here today among all the distinguished panelists, and it's such an honor indeed to listen to all the distinguished panelists, at the same time to be able to speak to them and connect with them. I would like to briefly touch on a couple of, I would say, points, and I would like to start with where we are now in terms of relating to the topic we're discussing today in terms of the humanitarian crisis we are dealing with right now in Afghanistan. I would like to touch base on what we achieved in 20 years. Whatever we have achieved in 20 years, that was not, I would say, ideal. That was not something that we could say like, okay, we have been able to claim the equal citizenship among men and women. We could not claim that we do not have children as victims of war and conflict. And we could not claim the, I would say, being able to distribute equal opportunities, resources, and services across the country among all the citizens. But end of the day, whatever we had achieved in just 20 years, that was, I can call that as an Afghan, a fast-paced progress, where we have been in post 2001, or I would say late 2001, and where we have been by August 15th this year. I can say it was a very fast-paced and speedy progress. But where we are now, I mean, the government has been working on different, I would say, pillars in order to ensure that it's delivering on its mandate as a government, which managed the resources and had the legitimacy to govern the resources and distribute. But where we are now in terms of post 15th August, I mean, I can see on the ground, and I can, I'm in touch with the, I'm out of the country, but I'm in touch with the, with my family, with my friends on the ground, and my ex-colleagues and many other Afghans. We don't have access to education anymore. And I'm not just speaking for women. I'm speaking both for little girls and little boys. I'm speaking of the men as well. The curriculum, even for men, the curriculum is going to be changed. The languages, the science, technology, whatever that could help us in terms of education in order to align ourselves with the developments in other parts of the world, and to be a responsible, I would say, state across the world in terms of education, that's gone. And then if we come back to the girls' education, that's gone, unfortunately. I mean, we developed, or we came far way with the education, but we lost everything in the blink of an eye. And then when it comes to access to health services, we go back to whatever, I mean, when it comes to women's access to health services, I would like to touch base on that, because women, unfortunately, when it comes to the basic rights, women are the primary victim of the humanitarian, I would say, human rights. I mean, Taliban have started practicing the limiting their access to health services and considering them as a second gender. It's exactly the same policies they had towards women during their first round of ruling regime. But then when it comes to the overall access to health services from a humanitarian crisis perspective for the citizens, we have limited access to health services. They can't manage they can't fund, I would say, financially, the health centers. They have shortage of medicine. And with the increase in IDPs because of the war and conflict and the, I would say, the number of population you can have behind the borders, it's getting, I would say, terribly worse. The whole like access to health services situation. But then we have got access to justice. Unfortunately, this is equally affected, I would say, in a negative way, equally affected like the education pillar in Afghanistan. When it comes to ensuring justice across the whole country, and particularly when it comes to women, because access to justice was part of what we claimed, like we are having the foundation to protect our women and children. To a great extent, I would say for the women, to a great extent, that's gone. For the men, I can't believe that there would be justice at all. But then we have got the food security. Because of the economic downturn right now, I mean, food security normally in Afghanistan, the biggest, I would say, issues that, I mean, the biggest portion of the population which has been dealing with the food security has been women in Afghanistan. 70% of the, I would say that the ones who have not been able to have access to food security have been women. I mean, who did not have access food security have been women. But now with the increase in IDPs, the economic downturn, it's getting worse. But then we have got security, I mean, the overall security, not just talking, I mean, speaking of the shelter, IDP has increased the lack of shelters for the women, I mean, being displaced. But then at the same time, we are not just talking about the displaced anymore. We are also talking about the refugees, and I'm just one of them. I'm just out of the country and I'm a homeless person. When it comes to the security itself, like employment for women, that's gone. For the men employment, most of them have lost their jobs because of the change in the government, the change in the regime, but the ones who have been out of the government or even being employed by the NGOs, again, because of the shift in the regime or the recent changes, many have lost their jobs. I'm speaking of hundreds of thousands of individuals. Close to 1 million have been government employees. And then I would like to touch base on I would like to touch base on the security, the overall security situation. Unfortunately, how I would divide the security threats to the citizens of Afghanistan, it's coming from 3 different sources. The first source of security threats, I would say physically, mentally, and property-wise, it's Taliban. They are victimizing, or they pose security threats to women, they pose security threats to civil society, to, I would say, youngsters who wants to pursue education, to media, to journalists, or anyone that is somehow has been considered as an ally to the government, to the democratic government, or somehow a pro, I would say, government republic, or as an ally to the international coalition. But at the same time, we have got 67% of the population that I would consider them as post 9/11 generation. And Taliban is I would say, poses security threats to them as well, because they keep resisting, and they are unarmed civilians who has a very civilized and peaceful approach to resist. And they're dealing with an armed group who, I would say, who would go extra miles in order to suppress them. Or they can go to the extreme violence level to suppress them. And the second, I would say, source of, I can't say it's a source of threat, but I would say the second reason that we have civilian casualty, we have got displaced, and at the same time, we have got wounded and injured citizens that has left behind, is the Northern resistance. They have got a cause, but it has added to, I would say, to the whole conflict across the country. And that also has left, I mean, the conflict between both sides has also left casualties behind across the country. And of course, many injured, many wounded, and as I mentioned, has added to the IDP numbers. But then we have got the third source of threat, which is the ISIS-K and all the other small terrorist groups and organizations that used to be under the umbrella of the Taliban. It's more than 20 groups and organizations, according to the previous, I would say, intelligence structure of the government. So now with the frustrations we have had with, I mean, the government, the democratic government has had with the Taliban, now the same frustration Taliban has got with the ISIS-K and the other small, I would say, terrorist groups. That also has added to the whole conflict level. At the same time, the humanitarian crisis we have got across the country, and that also has added to the security threats mentally, physically, and property-wise to the citizens. If I would put it in 3 different, I would like to put it in 3 different, in three categories. Economically, Afghanistan is dealing with a crisis. There's an economic downturn, and I would say the economic cycle is not moving as good as it should in order to be able to help the citizens to have a survival even. But then when it comes to the banks are closed, there's no money across the country, and people have lost their jobs. Politically, we are in a very, I can't say unstable, but we are in the middle of nowhere. There's a castle in the air, I would say. We've got a constitution. The Taliban's new structure is first. It's not a well-defined structure so far, but at the same time, it's against the constitution. They haven't changed the constitution yet, but they have, and they haven't introduced actually a new constitution for themselves as well. But they have changed the whole structure and the policies, and I mean, the practices of law, the enforcement of law. They've got their own laws, which is not yet legally replaced with the legal, the legislations we have had in place. So right now, the constitution is there in place, and that's still accepted because they haven't changed it. But then the Taliban's practices, the legal, I would say, the law enforcement, at the same time, the structure is completely different. But then when we come to, so that's the political side of it. And security-wise, as I mentioned, we've got civilian casualties, and it's a disaster. The civilian, the children victimization goes on. The rate has increased. I can't come up right now. I don't have in mind the exact number of the, I would say, the victimization rate of the children in terms of abuse, in terms of violence, in terms of, I would say, casualties. But then violence against women, of course, that has increased. But what what I want to, at the end, propose in terms of what can be the next course of action immediately. I don't want to touch on the long-term course of action, but I would like to touch base on the short-term course of action or the immediate course of action for the international community, mainly. I have nothing to say to Taliban. It's like, let's separate our humanitarian hats with our political and economic hats. Let's keep them different. Let's keep them separate. No matter if Taliban would be recognized internationally or they are given legitimacy state-wise, but let's not forget that there are 38 million civilians on the ground and they need our help. So the humanitarian assistance, it should be, because this is the right time. It's much better, in terms of having the right time, this is exactly the right time where they need our assistance, the international community's assistance, and way, way more than what we used to have during the previous government regime. So that's why I would say that humanitarian assistance should not just be kept the pace of the humanitarian assistance and the flow, but at the same time, I think it needs to be increased. But I understand at the same time that the challenge remains there, how it should be reached there, what are the technical mechanisms, and how would be the whole accountability mechanism. I know how challenging that is, but there's no way, nothing impossible all across the world. And I would like to end my remarks with a saying. It's not actually a saying. I would just like to quote something from the World War II ending. And it says that first they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews and I did not speak up because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me. And I want to say that if we are supposed to, no matter, without humanitarian causes doesn't have a boundary. And sometimes I would say, I do still believe that politics is there to serve humanity. And that's why I would like to avoid, when it comes to humanitarian crisis, I would like to avoid all the political perspectives I can ever have. Thank you so much for having me, and it has been a great pleasure and honor being among all the distinguished panelists. Looking forward to listen to the remaining panelists.
Thank you very much, Excellency Husna. You elaborated the things on ground, and the crisis the people of Afghanistan are facing because of the, I will say, the ignorance and blindness of the international community. Obviously, we was all in favor that the foreign forces should leave the Afghanistan as a sovereign Afghanistan, and no one should interfere into the internal affair of Afghanistan. It is a right of the people of Afghanistan to choose the system for themselves and to elect their representative themselves and the government themselves. Obviously, this is in a high time, and I must say that the international community should accelerate the humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan without politicizing, as you said, without politicizing and to make it the matter of ego or fear. I'm very much in favor of it. And on the other hand, We are emphasizing all the neighboring countries, including Pakistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and China, Russia, including the United States of America, and other allies, those who left the Afghanistan and the sort of middle of nowhere. Obviously, today we speak. I respond to your quote of Second World War. When we speak for others, we speak for ourselves, and we are not leaving any stone untouched to speak for the people of Afghanistan on a humanitarian basis. We are not going to stop ourselves to speaking for the women and girls of Afghanistan, boys and men of Afghanistan, for their fundamental right of an education and development. Obviously, this is a tough time, and for that reason, this high-level sideline event has been organized on the very day when the world is celebrating the International Peace Day. So that the interconnected thing is that if there is no peace, then there is no humanity and humanitarian assistance. So we need the peace for Afghanistan, and we need the peace for the whole region and entire world. We don't want to see the terrorism should float up into the Afghanistan by any means from any group of like, and you mentioned the ISIS or the Al-Qaeda or someone else. Thank you very much for your valuable statement as a human rights and women rights activist and a former deputy minister. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to move towards the security analyst of the region. I'm giving the floor Brigadier Muhammad Khan. Brigadier retired Professor Dr. Muhammad Khan is a very vital international security expert. He been head of a department of the International Relations of the National Defense University, Islamabad. He was a member of the Prime Minister's Foreign Policy Formulation Team for Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia. And currently, he is engaged with teaching and collaboration and diplomacy into the region on our international relations. Honorable Brigadier Muhammad Khan, floor is yours. Sir.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellency, Ambassador Dr. Muhammad Shahid, thank you very much. Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, particularly the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Sayyid Yusuf Raza Gilani, and my Afghan friends, those who have spoken and gave us the reality about on ground. I'm thankful to everybody, those who have spoken about Afghanistan and for the right of Afghan people. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, the International Day of Peace is rightly chosen by Excellency Ambassador Shahid. And on this day, we expect that there will be no war. There will be absence of war. There will be absence of violence. We understand that there is a sort of absence of war in Afghanistan, but really the situation is debatable whether there is an absence of violence also. Academically, since I am an academician now, I would say that there are two perspectives emerging on this emerging humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. The one perspective is purely considered to be the Western, and the perspective is pertaining to the something that what as a matter of fact is happening in Afghanistan. The debate which has been initiated by this perspective or this school of thought, they're talking about what as a matter of fact the Taliban repression, the revenge against all those Afghans, those who have been supporting directly or indirectly to United States and the NATO forces during last 2 decades. This school of thought believed that there must be evacuations of all these people before they are mistreated by the Taliban. So far, more than 1.3 million Afghans, they have been evacuated variously by international flights and all that. But a reasonable number of the Afghans, those who are still looking forward that they would leave at various destinations in order to have a better future, because they considered that at some stage, at some level, Taliban, they are going to mistreat them, or there would be a revengeful act of the Taliban. Let me say that as per UNHCR, there are almost more than 1 million Afghans. They are ready or expected to leave Afghanistan in next few months, provided there is no stoppage from Taliban. And I also doubt that Taliban would let anybody to go out of the country once they have established their rule in Afghanistan. However, on the part of Taliban, the government of the Taliban, as it was said by Zabiullah Mujahid, and later on it was strengthened by other statements, that they are not going to be revengeful. And there was a general amnesty announced by the Taliban government. Nevertheless, there are contrasting and contradictory reports about the treatment of Taliban with the Afghan masses, particularly the women, and those of the groups which perhaps they are not the Taliban in origin. The second school of thought, they talk about the ground realities in Afghanistan. And this ground reality which has emerged owing to the hasty pullout of United States and NATO forces, without any reconciliation process, without stabilizing Afghanistan, and without a future plan for the Afghanistan. After all, NATO and US forces stayed in Afghanistan for 2 decades, and it was quite a sufficient time in order to stabilize Afghanistan. And particularly after 29th February 2020, the day it was an agreement between Taliban and United States, things would have been materialized in the best interest of Afghan nationals, the Afghan masses. But unfortunately, that is not done. It is said that more than 18 million Afghans required humanitarian assistance. And this is something, it is said that this was required even before the Taliban took over the power. Over 5.4 million Afghans, they are already displaced within the country. And this is indeed unfortunate that they are battling this poverty, they are battling this displacement, and they are battling with what it is the COVID-19 is. Poverty and the hunger, they have further risen since the Taliban has taken over. As per the UN reports, UN estimates, particularly the United Nations Secretary General has confessed that Afghans, they are facing perhaps the most perilous hour, particularly in this recent 1 month. If food supplies and the finances, they remain suspended, 14 million people, they are going to be hungry. And 14 million people, ladies and gentlemen, means a lot. According to World Food Program, 1/3 of Afghanistan is total, total 38 million population is facing food insecurity. And we must remember that there is the onset of the winter. I mean, October onward, it is going to be a winter, and Afghanistan faces harsh winter every year. Then, ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 million children. They are also malnourished as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And this is going to be multiplied in the days to come if the international assistance and what it is, the food program is not given, the things are not supplied in Afghanistan. So Afghanistan has faced severe food shortages even before the Taliban takeover. Some 40% of Afghan crops, they have been destroyed, and livestock has also been devastated. So what is indeed demanded from the Taliban government? From my perspective, Taliban must have an inclusive government. It's not that they should rule and they should minus the ethnic groups, which have the large majority also. And this has been emphasized by the international community and the countries like Pakistan. Apart from the ethnic representation in the government, there must be a substantial women participation in the government. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, Islam doesn't disallow the women to be part of the government or any holding of any official position. Then respect the human rights. Another expectation from the Taliban or the demand from the Taliban is that they must respect the human rights, especially the women and children. And what our friend from Afghanistan, she was telling that it's not only women's rights and the girls for that matter, or the kids, it is everybody's rights. And I agree to her that yes, it is right for every Afghan because every Afghan is affected. Then open the educational institutions for everyone, male and female. Why should you close the educational institutions? Because Islam stress on what education for everyone, whether it is male or the female. And while stopping the women or the female going to educational institution, it is a violation of what the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, has given a message about the education. Then let women folk continuing working as they were working previously. Never again Afghanistan should act as a center of terrorism. This is again a demand from the international community, and it is a demand from the regional countries, because the regional countries, they have been affected, and countries like Pakistan has affected much more than any other country. And then, ladies and gentlemen, we expect Taliban to fight against what it has been, the drugs, because this drug is against the humanity, against what it is indeed the spirit of humanities. And Afghan Taliban must give a sort of a clarity that there is no drug trafficking and smuggling all around. But at the same time, there are some of the expectations from the international community. And those expectations are away from what the Taliban rule is. After all, entire Afghanistan doesn't belong to Taliban. There may be few thousand ruling the country for the time being, but there are 38 million Afghans who need the world attention. And we expect from the international community to deliver at least the essential humanitarian assistance for the people of Afghanistan. Let's unfreeze Afghanistan reserve, as without the cash, without the economy, things would go toward the devastation, and devastation of Afghanistan is going to be very harsh and serious for all the countries in the neighborhood as well as the international community. Afghanistan needs urgent and sustained support from the international community to prevent large-scale humanitarian crisis. Since the conference is on the humanitarian crisis, so this is one of the essential requirements from the international community. The humanitarian situation in Afghanistan remains desperate. If public services and the economic collapse, we will see even greater suffering, instability, and displacement, both within and outside the country, if there is a misgovernance, bad governance, and suppression on the ethnic basis or on the basis of any sectarian for that matter. The international community must therefore engage the Afghanistan quickly in order to prevent much bigger humanitarian crisis that will have not only regional but the global implication. So in summary, I would say that Afghanistan has been ravaged by 4 decades of war. Before coronavirus pandemic, at least 54% population of the country was below the poverty line. And as per the current estimate, it is more than 72%. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. And last year, even the former president, Ashraf Ghani, he admitted that 90% of the population of Afghanistan, they are living on less than $2 a day, which indeed is a pathetic condition. Afghan must not pay twice for failure of international community. For failure or what it has been taken over by the Taliban. First for the war and now for the neglect of international community. While international attention has been understandably focused on evacuation of few, 38 million Afghan masses remain in a country on the verge of humanitarian meltdown, which, ladies and gentlemen, should not be allowed. And I would say that very respected dignitaries, excellencies, they are here in this conference, and United Nations 76th session, General Assembly 76th session is ongoing. I think let's make a big move toward convincing the world, because the earlier conference, which took place in Geneva, that has not brought any fruitful promise, any fruitful assistance for the Afghanistan. So let's make a big a deal in this UN General Assembly conference for humanitarian assistance of Afghanistan before it is too late and before the country is really devastated. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, particularly Ambassador Excellency Shahid.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Brigadier Sahab, for your valuable thoughts on a humanitarian aspect. Obviously, the Afghanistan is facing humanitarian crisis not after the Taliban. It was started before the Taliban as well, which has been admitted by the former President Ashraf Ghani and his administration too. Again, the failure was the international community, because the international community was there in Afghanistan. The failure to strengthen the institution lies on the shoulder of international community for democracy, for institutionalization, for a strong military, and etc., whatever the promises has been given by the international community that been gone into the vein in over one night. This is what we call it, the catastrophe of human genocide. It is a human genocide when the 18 million people, I mean, out of 35 million, the 18 million people are suffering from the food security, shelter, displacement, and again, the pandemic. I mean, might be the poorest country will be having a COVID-19 vaccine, but who will provide the vaccine to the people of Afghanistan? This is the very big mark which the international community, especially the UN General Assembly, has to undertake at this moment. Obviously, I think the President of United States of America is now he been addressing the United Nations General Assembly. We will all watch what he will say, but he have to be also watched what we say. So now moving towards other security expert, Honorable Brigadier Muhammad Aslam Khan, former senior Joint Secretary Political Affairs of the Prime Minister of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan Secretariat, security analyst, expert, and he is one, because the Afghanistan is facing drought. He is the one who is advocating for the conservation and water management system because of the climate change, and he is now a climate activist as well. So the floor is yours, Honorable Brigadier Muhammad Aslam Khan.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Shahid Saab. What a pleasure to be listening to all the distinguished guests, and what an intellectual discussion which we have witnessed so far. I know there are still many speakers, so I will try to be as short as possible, because most of the dignitaries have covered all aspects. So first of all, I am grateful to Amina also. Madam Amina, she covered the climate change, which I was to cover it. So that is one of the major issue, because with that, there are the water crisis, with that is the food security. But since today is a day of peace, international peace. So if there is a peace in Afghanistan, if there is a stable Afghanistan, that is good for the region. That is why I would request that all international efforts, all donors, they have to support Afghanistan at this particular moment. Because like many of my predecessors, they have said that after all, even if it is an Taliban government, but they're all humans, and all human needs to be supported. Why the international community is quiet? Why they have a question mark whether they would, if they give our donations or support, that will not be correctly utilized? Why we are underestimating these people? I think we should give whatever the humanitarian people a choice that they should support them at this moment, because unless Afghanistan is not peaceful, there will be difficulty in the region, and that nobody would like to see that. And the peace cannot prevail without, if people are hungry, if they are not getting the food timely, as many of the speakers have pointed out. Before Taliban takeover, there was 30% of people was having the problem food security. Now it is 40%. So within 15-20 days, there has been an increase of 10%. Then there is education, there is a health. If we have to concentrate on education, because 7 million children, they need to be educated. But there are some good news also coming. While there are negative news, good news are also coming that Taliban or whatever the government, they have also learned some lessons from the past, and they are trying to have trying to consolidate in a manner that that humanitarians violations are not there, human rights are not violations are not there. So some good news are also there, while there may be some negative and there may be some propaganda, but some good news also coming from that side. So that is one thing. The other aspect is, of course, the IDPs and the refugees. There are over 600,000 IDPs. So they have to be taken care of that. And how it can be taken care of? We have gone through this experience. When we had the IDPs, we know the international funding was required to support them. And that is why soon after that, they went back to their area. So we would like these Afghanis who are in IDP camps to go back and lead a normal life. And similarly, the refugees, because if there is a refugees spillover to other countries, Iran and other neighboring countries, Pakistan, there is an issue. Then there has to be a lot of funding required to support them. So in nutshell, because I don't want to take time, my statement would be that I would make a humble appeal to all the international organizations, to all the international donors. Please, this is the time to support Afghanistan. If you want to see a stable, a peaceful Afghanistan, so which everybody would like to see it. So let's come forward, and this is to give the humanitarian assistance to the people of Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Muhammad Aslam Khan. You cover a humanitarian aspect. Obviously, 4.5 million people are displaced. 18 million people need the humanitarian aid. 40% of our crops has been destroyed because of the drought hit, and there is a severe problem of the food security. Obviously, the international community has to understand this. I am giving the floor to the young and dynamic youth of Pakistan. They want to put their voice for the tragedy the Afghan peoples are facing today. Mr. Muhammad Shahzad Khan is the president of the Youth Council of Pakistan. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ambassador Shahid Amin Khan, Chairman, International Human Rights Commission. I'm delighted to take the opportunity to thank all the dignitaries, the Honorable former Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani, my respected Sir Brigadier Khan, and the young minds, Jennifer from New York State Assembly, and Husna Jalil, the former Foreign Minister, former Foreign Minister of Maldives, and other global leaders, ambassadors, and head of states. Thank you so much. And I'm again thankful to the IHRC for giving me this opportunity to speak my voice and the United Nations General Assembly sideline session, International Conference on Afghanistan, the humanitarian crisis. I would like to throw light upon the very precise and the agenda of the United Nations, which they have put almost 40 years ago after the Cold War. The post-conflict reconstruction and ethnically divided societies. This was the main concept at the end of Cold War, the end of proxy wars. There emerged proxies, there emerged new conflicts, and new states emerged like the Central Asian states after the USSR disintegration. So United Nations give an agenda, and I would like to request every participant to listen to this agenda, please. They said that new strategies needed for peace sustaining in post-conflict settings, activities undertaken on the far side of the conflict to reassemble the foundation of peace and provide tools for building on those foundations, something that is more than just an absence of war. That was the main agenda of the United Nations, and they have given it right after the Cold War. As we know, in 90s, the newly state emerged, the failing states, the weak states, and when the war closed, so there emerged a proxies, a conflicts, and as the agenda said by the United Nations, that only absence of war is not enough for peace, for the smooth functioning of that society, of that era. USSR came to Afghanistan, United States came to Afghanistan, they fought, they came back, but they did not bother to give importance to the agenda of the United Nations. Though they are the veto, they are the leading powers, that human rights champions, and they must give importance to the agenda at least. I'm not talking about my stance, the Pakistan stance, I'm talking about the official agenda of the United Nations. What they need at that time, and I will compare that right now after the US troops withdrawal and what they have did with Afghanistan, and I would also request the international community what to do next. The security, the first one, to retransfer of monopoly of force to the state, disarmament of private and parastatal combat units, building national security institutions, civilian control of military and police, temporary deployment of multilateral peacekeeping forces. US claiming that they invested on the weaponization of Afghanistan, on the militarization of Afghanistan, but what need actually as per the agenda, they did not done that in Afghanistan. The next very much important thing, which they ignored totally, the political side, the composition of a constitution, and then strengthening of the constitution and rebuilding the democratic institutions and promotion of rule of law, judicial system, strengthen civil societies, organizations to engage them in peacekeeping missions, and to put Afghanistan, to put any area on a smooth track for their future goals. The next is the psychosocial. This is also too much important. I'm just figuring out the United Nations agendas. Reconciliation between civilians. What do you really think the United States or even the UK or even the European Union are the main champion of the United Nations intervene in this? No. And former combatant and among different social groups, Truth Commission for perpetrators and wrongdoings and for victims to forgive the perpetrators, tribunals for reconciliation through a collectivization of guilt. And the last one is the socio-economic problems of the post-conflict societies, respectively improvement of the socio-economic well-being of civilians, humanitarian assistance in the immediate aftermath of the conflict, clear land mines, many things, resettling refugees. Right now, you can say we are hosting still, Pakistan are hosting, we offering scholarships to Afghani students. We are hosting the Afghan nationals and the displaced people. They must focus on the sustainable economic growth and free market economy. So what I consider that must be done by the United States and then must be intervened by the United Nations was to hand over the weapons, the military bases officially to the Afghanistan government. They did not did this. People are ignoring these things. And as I said, this is not my statement. This is not the statement of the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. This is the statement, the agenda of the United Nations, which the United States and even itself the United Nations is ignoring this in Afghanistan. What we need now, I would like to request international human rights agencies, the financial economic agencies, the United Nations bodies, Human Rights Council, Security Council to come forward and facilitate the new making government of Afghanistan, because the people will suffer. In the past, people suffered. In the back 40 years back, the Afghani suffered. So we do not want the Afghani people more to suffer in this war of great powers, our Taliban and the United States and whatsoever. But we have to give floor to the people of Afghanistan. They have to decide. Their women have to decide about their rights, about how and who will govern them. You can see the history of Afghanistan. It's full of sacrifices. It's full of bravery. All the leaders. So again, I'm concluding, as I know the time is very short, and it's an honor for me to speak at the UN General Assembly sideline session on Afghanistan, the humanitarian crisis. We are struggling day and night to facilitate the Afghani students, engaging them with youth dialogues between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and all these. But the things that I mentioned were very much important, were very much of concern that the United Nations have ignored, the United States have ignored, and they're the so-called human rights champions. So how can we expect other thing from them, that they stayed 20 years, for 2 decades in Afghanistan, and what they have done went against the UN agenda. Pakistan is offering dialogue with Taliban. We are hosting students. We are thinking of increasing student visas, scholarships for Afghani students. What's in our capacity? What's in the capacity of Pakistan? And as a representative of the Youth Council Pakistan, what I am doing and what we have planned to do to engage the youth of Afghanistan in co-curricular activities and capacity building, to engage them with power corridors, with scholarships, with educational activities, with culture exchange program. That's what the civil society can do. And on the behalf of Dr. Shahid Amin Khan, IHRC, I would like to request all of you, as Ambassador Shahid said to you about the International Humanitarian Day, that they are going to organize some conferences here in Pakistan. So I would love to host you all here in Pakistan, and we will invite youth delegates from Afghanistan to come and sit here with global leaders and discuss their ideas. You will listen to them, and then you will come to know about ground realities. So I'm concluding here. Thank you so much, everyone, for bearing. I'm in a hurry because a lot of meetings are pending. And thank you so much again, Dr. Ambassador Shahid Muhammad Amin Khan, and wishing you best of luck for the future activities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Muhammad Shahzad Khan, President of the Youth Council of Pakistan, for your valuable remarks. Obviously, the international community is hearing it. Now I'm giving the floor to on ground, our envoy, Ambassador Hadajan Tahani. He is representing International Human Rights Commission as a special envoy to Afghanistan, as an ambassador to the Afghanistan, and he is a witness of ongoing our negotiation, our activities for the peoples of Afghanistan. Ambassador Hidayat, the floor is yours. Ambassador Hidayat, the floor is yours. In the meantime, I'm giving the floor to from the United Kingdom, Mr. Muzaffar, Advocate Muzaffar Mansoor from the United Kingdom. He wants to add something with his views and remarks. Advocate Muzaffar Mansoor, floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Your Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Shahid Amin, the chairman of IHRC. I am very grateful for you to first of all to allow me to address this August very high profile meeting organized by him. It is my second time attending the meeting. First I attended the climate change. I'm a solicitor advocate practicing for 20 years in the United Kingdom, and I am dealing human rights from all over the countries, people coming and fleeing from various countries and coming to the United Kingdom, and their human rights cases I'm dealing. Today is a peace day, which is organized by His Excellency to celebrate it. And my message will be, I've heard very carefully His Excellency Sayyid Yusuf Raza Gilani, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan. His views were excellent, along with other views of Naseem Malik, His Excellency, and various learned ambassadors of various countries and various portfolios there from representing various organizations. My message to the peace is there are 3-4 words which work together. That is persecution, refugee, human rights, and brain drain. This is the cause of, the brain drain is the cause of all these things. Particularly in Afghanistan, if there is no brain drain in the past 20 or 30 years, the Afghanistan would have been in a better position to have their own manpower. So my request to these countries who are producing refugees should stop that, and they should address their problems within their own countries and establish their human rights. If a person knows his own human rights, he can protect the human rights of his own neighbor, and there will be no clash, and there will be no insult or no undermining of human rights of anybody, and there will be peace in the world. That is my request to everybody to take home. Thank you, sir. I'm very grateful.
Thank you very much, Advocate Muzaffar Mansoor, for your valuable few lines. I respect, and hopefully the international community is looking toward this event. They will come to know. The floor is with you, Ambassador Hidayat Tahani. Ambassador, unmute yourself. Ambassador, unmute yourself. I think there is some technical reasons. We are not unable to reach on him. In the conclusion of this high-level sideline event on the 76th General Assembly session, we concluded with these 2 type of demands which will be presented to the both parties. The one, to the international community to assist the people of Afghanistan in need of humanitarian crisis and in need of the humanitarian assistance. International community should provide the demand as has been made by the World Food Program, ICRC, and International Red Crescent for providing the relief and humanitarian assistance to the 18 million people, those who are in need at this time. Secondly, the international community must uphold the negotiation tool and to engage the present interim government, which is ruling in Afghanistan, to engage them to ensure the end of a vulnerability of the people of Afghanistan. International community should provide them the assistance in mechanism. International community should force them to implement the international convents which the Afghanistan are signatory. International community should convene a multilateral meeting after the General Assembly session, including Pakistan, Iran, China, Russia, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and the other stakeholders like the European Union, United States of America, Canada, Australia, Japan, to build up the structure and set up which the Afghan peoples need on a humanitarian grounds. Provide them the skills so that they will be able to reach with the pupils for their own desires. Secondly, we demand from the Taliban regime to allow the girls and women, boys and men for an education. They should look at the pupils, those who are jobless or forced to be jobless. They should respect the freedom of speech, freedom of media, and freedom of the non-governmental organizations, those who are assisting the people of Afghanistan. Taliban regime should look at the future of the Afghanistan to come out from the vulnerability to a stable state. Taliban should ensure that the no cross-border terrorism will be happen again. Taliban should ensure that drugs trade will be prohibited. As the climate change is devastating the situation, I will say to the WHO, as the WHO Director General Dr. Tedros was visiting Afghanistan and is in Afghanistan, to provide the total population of the Afghanistan the COVID-19 vaccine free of charge immediately, and deployed the WHO and asked the other countries that they should deploy the health staff to assist the people of Afghanistan to deal the pandemic situation. International community must provide the humanitarian aid to the displaced people and also ensure that the respect of human rights should be prevailed by all means according to the wishes of international community, and the aspiration of the people of Afghanistan. I conclude this with this suggestion, which in writing will be reached to the all distinguished panelists and guests for endorsement, and we will forward it to the United Nations General Assembly President, 76th Section President Abdullah Shahid, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, the Foreign Minister of Maldives, and we will ensure that this should be also goes to the Taliban government representative in Afghanistan. We have to make this surety that a mutual understanding, cooperation, and recognition should be needed at this moment for the interim setup of the Afghanistan. An interim setup of the Afghanistan should make sure the equal and active participation of a woman in a decision maker, authorities, and institutions. By these words, I may thank you, all of you, for having a time, and may God bless the humanity, and may God, Allah, prevail the peace into the world on the day of Afghanistan. Thank you very much. And by that, God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much.